This is Bad Vibes. Tonight's video is on being followed, stalked, or anything that has to do with a creepy old van. You know, the ones that your parents warned you about. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. I unfortunately have a plethora of these kinds of stories. I've encountered a ton of creeps as a teen, and this is about one of them. Back in high school, I lived pretty close to my school building. It was maybe a 15 to 20 minute walk, at the most. In my senior year, I had 2 free periods at the end of my day instead of class. I took extra courses in night school and summer school the year before, so I usually start walking home around 1:30 or so. The area I used to live in was extremely quiet, to the point where, depending on certain weather or time of day, it was unnerving to walk the streets. It was suburbia, but the kind where people barely came out of their houses. It was a super rainy day, the sky was murky, and no one was outside, not even for a walk, despite it being daylight. I had my headphones in, listening to music on the way home. I was nearing a small library around the corner from my house when out of the corner of my eye I noticed this large van with tinted windows. No one was parked near the library because it was closed that day. Odd, I thought, that someone was choosing to park there now. I continued walking until I heard a muffled sound. Curious, I took one of my earbuds out and looked up to my right. The front seat of the van had rolled down their window, and I could see the face of a middle-aged man with a mustache. I was confused, wondering, was he talking to me? And he drove slowly alongside me, presumably repeating what I didn't hear earlier. "Are you alone?" An alarm immediately went off in my head. There was no one in sight, and I was a small teenager who didn't know what to do. I panicked, put my earbud back in, and as I turned around promptly to walk the other way, he began to glare intensely at me and turned his van around to follow me. My music was paused, and I was pretending I didn't hear him. I had 2 choices, the elementary school coming up ahead, or back where I came from. The back of the elementary school was hard to reach quickly, and I was scared that I'd corner myself in. I kept walking quickly, not looking at the van following me. I was on the way back to my high school. Once I got closer, the van sped away quickly. It was getting towards the end of the day there, and people were starting to leave. Almost hyperventilating, I got to the office to tell the secretary everything that just happened. I got my mom to pick me up, and as we drove home, I described the van to her. We reported it to the police, and the next day, I was picked up early from school. The smart woman she is decided to drive by the library that day, around the time I usually walked home. It was quiet out, as usual. Then, she saw the van with tinted windows, as I described it to her. It was parked, waiting for someone. Waiting for me. We gave the license plate to the police, and explained our concerns. When we checked back in on them, they told us that they found the owner of the van. He was renting the basement of a house nearby the library. He said he was waiting there to pick up his kids. The elementary school wouldn't have been let out until nearly 4 p.m., so why was he hanging out there around 1 p.m.? It was clearly a lie, but the police said that they'll keep an eye on him, and they weren't in their rights to do anything else. Frustratingly, the last update we got was that he moved shortly after, with no consequences. So I just turned 18 a few weeks ago, and due to the pandemic and all, I wouldn't, or rather couldn't, throw a big party. I just had 2 of my closest friends over. Let's call them Melissa and Carla. They both were 18 as well. We planned on having a fun evening the night before I turned 18, and just made some fancy dinner and have some fun, and that's what we did. We didn't have any alcohol. So when 12 o'clock rolled around, we celebrated some, and I unwrapped their gifts, one of which was one of those realistic looking seal plushies, which was kind of a joke because I went through a phase when I found a fat seal incredibly adorable and got Instagram ads for those things all the time. Anyway, we were really hyped, and we decided to go walk with our music box and the plushie at about 1 in the morning. Just for context, we live in a relatively small, rural town, but it's next to a big lake, so there's a bunch of tourists in the summer, and we also have multiple clinics around, one for eating disorders, and the other one, a rehab center. It's usually really safe and quiet, especially at night. So we dance and sing along loudly on the empty streets, just having fun with it. We pass a few people, but they seem normal and nice. But generally, it's really empty and deserted on the streets. As we approach this big empty parking lot, which we needed to pass by in order to get back home, I noticed a guy in a dark hooded pullover coming from the parking lot across the street to the side that we were walking on. We turned the music down as he passed, and he greeted us briefly in passing, and we greeted him back. He looked to be in his mid-30s, but seemed totally non-threatening and normal to us at that point. We thought nothing more of it as we walked and turned the music back up. Now, in order to get home, we had to go through some small patch of woods where there was no streetlights or houses nearby. As we started approaching the area, a few minutes after we met the man, we suddenly started hearing talking behind us. We realized that someone was walking about 10 meters behind us. At first, we thought he was just talking to someone on the phone, but it was pretty dark and we couldn't see if that was the case. When we passed one of the last streetlights before the patch of woods, we realized it was the same guy that had walked past us a few minutes before, who was walking in the opposite direction as us, and he would have had to turn around after he passed us in order to be right behind us. That was when we really started to get creeped out. We also realized that he wasn't on the phone, but because of the loud music we had on, we couldn't make out what he was saying. So in that moment, I, for some reason, figured it was a good idea to say, "I always have a knife with me," in a loud, speaking tone to my friends. They later told me that they actually bought it, but in reality, we had nothing with us in the case that we would need to defend ourselves. I kind of figured that maybe it would scare the guy off or something, but it sadly didn't. So there was one last house, which was actually an inn, that we would have to pass before we had to go through the patch of woods. I said to my friends that maybe he was staying there, but we all agreed that if he kept following us after that point, it couldn't be a coincidence, and he was indeed following us. In hindsight, we should have just turned around at that point and stayed in the well-lit, populated area, but I guess we weren't thinking that clear. So we passed the inn, and he was still following us. One of us turned our phone flashlight on as there were no more street lights and it was pitch black where we were going. We kept turning around and checking if he was still behind us, each time increasing our walking speed until we were nearly running, but he kept getting closer and closer. My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. I was scared for my life. I kept thinking that he could have some kind of weapon on him or something. Then one of my friends, Melissa, stopped and turned around. Carla and me stood a few meters behind her. Immediately the guy approached her, asking her if we had any alcohol or cigarettes. She answered in a totally sober tone that we in fact didn't have anything with us. He took a few steps towards her, asking again if we really didn't have anything with us that we could give him. Melissa answered more firmly this time that we didn't have anything. This guy really seemed desperate. At this point, Melissa said that she was ready to kick him in the balls if he took one step closer to her. She actually does kickboxing and knows how to defend herself, but still, he was a grown man and probably had more power than an 18-year-old girl. Carla and me were just frozen and didn't know what to do. I just kept standing there, saying nothing. He asked Melissa if we lived nearby or if we were here on vacation, to which she answered that we live in the area, as she figured it's better that he thinks we know the area and the people well and wouldn't get any ideas. Luckily for us, after a few more times reassuring him that we also didn't have anything for him at my home, I think the guy realized that he was getting nowhere with us and decided to just turn around and walk back the way he came from, leaving us half scared to death as we sped walk back to my house, glancing behind us every few seconds to check if he had decided to follow us home after all, which luckily he didn't. We arrived safely at my home, still scared, and I double checked that I locked the doors behind us. I couldn't really fall asleep that night, always thinking that I heard something outside. So creepy man who decided to follow three 18-year-old girls into the dark woods in the middle of the night to ask them for alcohol and cigarettes. What the heck were you thinking? Second post here. I had forgotten about this particular encounter until this morning. I was about 14 and in middle school when this happened. My mom picked me up from a sleepover and we went to our local Dollar General to pick up a few things. While inside, a man entered the store, maybe in his late 20s to early 30s. He seemed to be aimlessly walking around. People do that all the time in the store, so I didn't think anything of it and wasn't paying much attention. As a teenage girl that I was probably on my phone or something. Inside the store, the aisles are pretty close together, so seeing into the next one or listening to things even 2 or 3 aisles away was pretty easy. While as my mom and I were walking down the aisle, I occasionally saw this guy walking towards or around us, giving us glances but never actually coming near us, and I would hear him slowly shuffling behind us or the next aisle over. It is a small store with limited amount of space, so once again, I didn't really give it a second thought. Then, it was like every time we went to turn the corner or change aisles, he was darting to another aisle as if he didn't want us to see that he was there. I'd get a feeling that I was being watched, so I turned around and see him doing the same thing. Sometimes I was able to see him out of the corner of my eye, just peeking around the corner or at the end of the aisle, just watching. It was the creepiest thing ever at 14 years old. I remember my mom telling me to grab something from the other end of the store, and I refused to do it in fear of running into this guy without an adult present. As we were checking out, I saw him make a beeline for the exit. He was gone from the parking lot when we went to leave as well. I never said anything to my mom about it, as nothing actually happened, and there's really nothing that could be done. Well, sometime later, maybe a month or so, my mom gets a call from the sheriff's department, and they say to her that I need to come down immediately, because I may have been a witness to a crime. Naturally, I panicked, as any teenager would do, because at that point, I had forgotten about the previous incident. The officer rolled the clip from the Dollar General with us on the footage, as well as the dude. It confirmed my fears that day, and showed him literally following us around the store the whole time we were in there. And as soon as I turned around, he tried to hide. Later in the video, he was actually touching himself as he was watching me and my mom. I was disgusted. Turns out, right around the same time, he was arrested for exposing himself to an 8-year-old girl in the same store. I was completely freaked out and didn't want to think about what could have happened if I wandered off alone in that store that day. I was on my way home from work one day. The time was around 9 p.m., so I was rushing. Because of the time, there were only a few people around. As I was getting close to home, I had to pass by a gas station. I got close and looked up. I spotted a dark green van parked by the road. I started having stupid thoughts about how if someone opened the van door and dragged me in, no one would see me. I brushed off the weird thought and passed by the van without anything happening. I was a block away from my house now and saw the headlights from behind me, but they never passed me. I was paying close attention and waited for the car. All of a sudden, a loud car honk rang through the air. I turned around to see the van stopping right beside me on the road. The car that honked was behind the van, a frustrated driver wondering why the van was going so slow. As I looked up to see the driver of the van violently pulled away and sped down the road. I was scared. As this happened, my first instinct was to memorize the license plate number. My house was at the end of the block, and I was sure I saw the van pass the block and went off. I was almost at my door when for some reason I turned around because I felt like I was being watched. That's when I spotted the van across the road. It couldn't have been the same van, I thought. I couldn't see the color clearly as there weren't any streetlights across from my house. The van was parked as if it was going towards the gas station. That's when my eyes adjusted and I could just make out the license plate. It was the same van. I was shocked and looked up to see the driver. There were two men sitting in the front. There was a light on inside the van that was illuminating their faces. They looked angry. They were both looking right at me. It seemed like they were talking about something while still keeping their eyes on me. I had enough at this point and unlocked my door and ran in, slamming it and locking it. I ran in looking and calling for my mom. No one responded, so I was worried that the men would come in and kidnap me. I slowly crept to the window and looked out and found that the van was no longer there. This happened a few months ago, and I've been careful whenever I see a van near me. This happened to me when I was 15. I was in the city center by myself after finishing school and checking libraries and the video game stores. When I got bored, I went to the bus stop, which was about 10 minutes away from the shopping zone. At one point, I had to cross a big street, and while I was waiting for the stoplight to change, I felt an unknown man really near me. He was maybe around 30, short, with his face all red. He had balding blonde hair, and his clothes were dirty. I felt his breath on me, but I was just ignoring it, thinking that he was just waiting to cross, like everyone else. He waited alongside me for a few minutes without saying a thing, and again I just ignored it. When I was near the bus stop, he started talking to me. "Hi, what's your name?" A bit of small talk, and I answered him. I told him I was going home, and something sparked his eyes. He told me that he was coming with me. I said that my parents would be waiting for me, so he told me, "Oh, I'm sure they won't mind me sleeping with you tonight." I freaked out on the inside. That's when I realized he would follow me everywhere no matter what I said. I stopped answering him, and he asked me for my phone number and everything. Then the bus came. He got up and followed me. When I was about to pay for my ticket, I just thought to myself, no way, did a U-turn and started running away, leaving him at the bus. He didn't follow me. I went to the previous bus stop to take the next bus, waited for it in a hyperventilated state, but luckily I didn't see him again. I was driving around town late today, around 3 a.m., with a friend of mine, just cruising and talking about random stories. I noticed a car behind me, following me closely and aggressively. It was weird because I was driving calm and slow, without bothering anyone. I immediately noticed and figured something was wrong, so I took a right at the light. I noticed the same car followed me. I kinda made an abrupt but stupid decision and took the next right, which ended up being a dead end. This didn't stop the car from following me, which I thought it would. At this point, I was a bit confused and worried as to why someone would follow us this late at night. I went to the end of the dead end and quickly made a broken U-turn as the other car did the same. However, the car stopped for a second and basically had us pinned in. At this point, I got a glimpse of an old lady looking and smiling weirdly at us. I was confused as to what she wanted from us. She rolled down her window, and I did as well. She's laughing and smiling weirdly, making me very uncomfortable. She states how she's putting us both on the FBI extortion list, and how we'll both amount to nothing before she sped off. I didn't say a word as I was confused and shocked as to what was going on. I still don't know what the whole ordeal was, or who this old lady was. I don't even live near this area, and all I was doing was having a calm drive at 3 a.m. with a friend to clear our thoughts. It all happened so fast and unexpected, and it was just too weird to grasp. The car hadn't followed us for long, I'd say roughly 5 minutes, give or take. I make sure to watch my rearview mirror at all times, so I always notice when something odd or someone is following too closely. It was weird to say the least, but also confusing. This is my first post, and something happened a week ago. My blood still runs cold when I think about it. Keep in mind, this isn't like any of the really scary stories on here, but it scared me and was definitely out of the ordinary. My brother wanted to get a drink from a place both of us loved to go. It was going to close soon and he had work to do, so I went by myself. It wasn't very late, but it was already dark, and my parents had drummed into me since birth about the dangers of walking alone at night. I was kind of nervous that day, and even thought I've done it many times before, so I went and got both drinks, and for some reason, I didn't get a bag. I was walking along with both hands full. Bad idea. As I'm walking towards the street where my house was, I suddenly become aware of two men very close to me. One was in front of me, wearing a maroon pullover, and the other one was behind me, wearing a gray zipped up hoodie with the hood pulled up. I only turned around for a flash of a second, so I couldn't describe his face to you. I was weirded out because I was walking between them and was beginning to feel uncomfortable, like they were trying to herd me. Just as I was telling myself that I was clearly overreacting, I came across a garage that was down an alleyway, and a black Subaru was coming out. I had time to cross before they reached me. The person inside clearly wasn't counting on me doing that, so they swung around and parallel parked next to me, at most 2 feet away. So now, I was between the three men and a wall. When I saw the door open, I thought that was the end for me. I bolted and didn't stop running until I reached my house. So yeah, black Subaru driver, gray hoodie, and maroon pullover guy. Let's not meet. I live in a safe neighborhood in the Bay Area. We are lucky to have numerous outdoor parks nearby, which have been a saving grace since COVID started. Since gyms are closed, I've taken to running outside, and oftentimes I'll be running in the early evening. It's cooler, there are fewer people, and less crowds. Makes it a lot easier to run, especially in COVID times. I like decompressing after a stressful workday. As the days have been getting shorter, even though I try to start my runs when it's still light out, sometimes it does mean that it's dark during the latter half of my run. One day when I didn't have much daylight, I was sticking to running loops in the park closest to my home, which is well lit. I ran there all the time and have never felt unsafe until one night, perhaps a month or two ago. On that night, I was running my usual circular route in the long, skinny park that perhaps is a mile long. It had just gotten dark when an intimidating looking man dressed in all black, baggy clothing appeared from the grassy wooded area. He approached me while I was running on the sidewalk, the loops around the park, and started jogging next to me while calling out to me. I had my headphones in and I couldn't make out exactly what he was saying, but it was catcalling of some sort. Unnerved, I turned my music up and tuned him out and run faster, thinking he would leave me alone. I was wrong. He began running faster, pretty much in sync with me and parallel to me on the grassy part of the panhandle, so a smaller circumference of the loop I was running. I had just turned the corner of the end of the panhandle loop, so there was nowhere I could go to escape, and I began to panic because there weren't others around. And this section of the panhandle I was in was not particularly well lit. After rounding the end of the loop, still panicked, with this man still chasing me, I saw an older white man with AirPods in. He was walking up ahead on the path. I neared him. I slowed my run to a walking pace with him, but just a little bit behind him, so he did not know I was there. But I had effectively positioned him between the man and myself. Seeing this, the man chasing me also slowed down, but at this point he had already ran a bit ahead and couldn't slow down or come closer to me without raising the suspicion of the oblivious Samaritan I was using as a human shield. He began jogging ahead on the path in front of us, continuously looking back at me, only somewhat deterred. I kept walking in the pace with the Samaritan, all thoughts of continuing my run over. Focus on trying to figure out how I was going to get back home safely. We walked like this for perhaps a couple minutes until my cross street exit approached. The man had jogged ahead, further now, but kept looking back at me, as if he was waiting for the oblivious Samaritan to go wherever he was headed, presumably assuming that I would have to continue my run on the path towards him. At my cross-street intersection, the Samaritan just happened to turn left, which was the opposite direction where I needed to go. So I took it as my cue to peel right and sprint home as fast as I could, praying that there was enough distance between me and the harasser to lose him. I don't think I've ever ran so fast in my life. I made it home safely, and didn't see him on my block when I finally got to my apartment, so at least he doesn't know where I live, if he did in fact continue trying to follow me. I want to pretend like nothing bad would have happened had the oblivious Samaritan not been there, but I really got bad gut vibes, and was just so sketched out by this guy. How bold and persistent can someone be to chase a solo female that is running in a city park at night, for a fair amount of time, no less? I can't imagine he just wanted to chit-chat. If he did, he needs to seriously reconsider his tactics. I went to a small school. There were 8 girls in my class. It was a bit chilly out, so none of them wanted to go hang out after school, which was the usual plan on Fridays, as there was an ice cream shop about 15-minute walk from our school. However, my best friend stepped up and we agreed to go alone. There was no problems at first. The town is small, friendly, clean, and our parents gave us permission to go, even though it was just the 2 of us. It wasn't long until we noticed a white van trailing behind us. I distinctly remembered being told to avoid white vans at a young age, so I grew up terribly afraid of them. My friend and I laughed because we noticed it at the exact same moment, and I told her I was afraid of them. We picked up our pace, but so did the van. We didn't want to seem like scaredy cats, so we stopped, but so did the van. We began, along with the van, to inch forward, but eventually the van picked up speed and came even closer to us. It was terrifying. I grabbed my friend's wrist and with a painful smile, told her to go along with me. I held her hand and walked up to the front door of the nearest house, fiddled with my purse for a non-existent key, as we carried on an equally non-existent conversation. The van stopped right in front of us, and a scuffy man driving it rolled down his window and stared at us. Just then, my friend's mom drove up and asked if we wanted a ride. The van immediately sped off. We didn't tell my mom what happened right away. We took it lightheartedly, but as someone who grew up afraid of kidnappings, it was terrifying. When I was 15 years old, my friend and I, both female, used to walk from school to her house, about a 30-minute walk, on Fridays afternoons to start our weekends. We usually stopped at the sub shop in town for early dinner to eat while we played video games and hung out. After we got our sandwiches, we walked outside and continued to her house, about 15 more minutes. Outside of the sub shop, there's a man sitting on a bench outside the shop who I didn't see when we walked in. He was really tall and muscular, around 6'5", pale and bald, probably in his early to mid-30s, and very intimidating wearing his bright orange sweatshirt. The hairs on the back of my neck instantly stood up as soon as I saw him. I noticed right away that after we passed him, he got up from the bench and started walking behind us. Not so weird, maybe just going his way. But what made me instantly realize that this dude wasn't right was that he was holding his phone to his ear, but not talking at all. This was just before smartphones became a thing, so it wasn't like he was just swiping along on Tinder or checking Instagram. In this time, if he had a flip phone out and clearly weren't talking to someone, that was weird because that was the only thing you did with those cell phones. We actually spoke to people. So weird now, right? He did this for so long that he couldn't have been listening to his voicemail. I had a gut feeling that something was wrong, so I stopped walking and pretended to fumble around with something in my purse, so the man ended up in front of us and no longer following behind us. I tell my friend why I pretended and stopped walking, and she kinda blew me off. as if I was being paranoid. We start walking again, and there's a gas station up ahead. You can either walk across the gas station to the main road, or go down a side road around the gas station that will also eventually lead you to the main road. Just a longer route. My friend and I cut through the gas station, and the man went around and ended up being behind us again. He was still holding his phone to his ear, but not speaking. At this point, I'm eternally freaked out. I know he's following us, but I'm trying to play it cool and come up with a plan. While my friend still doesn't take me seriously. We get to a turn that's a shortcut to my friend's house. Now, this road is pretty remote. Cars usually don't drive down there often, and there isn't a house for quite some time. But it was the fastest way to get to my friend's house. Just past the road was a large shopping center. I told my friend that if we started walking down this remote road and the man follows, that he's 100% following us because no one goes down this road, really ever, and that I would just book it to the closest store in the shopping center. I looked behind me to check where the man is, and he somehow got significantly closer to us, and of course, started walking down the road. We made eye contact, and he gave me the creepiest grin. I instantly started running with my friend following me, and we ran into a Rite Aid, while the guy continued to follow, but he doesn't go in the store. We get into the store, and the cashier takes notice that we are freaked out and asks what's wrong, so we tell her. She asks if we need the police, but we decline, and I just call my dad to pick us up and drop us off at my friend's house. My dad arrives about 10 minutes later with a cashier clerk keeping an eye on us, and the man was nowhere to be found. My dad wanted to find the guy, but my dad was older in his 60s, and this man was in his 30s and huge, so he definitely would have beaten my dad up, or worse. So I just begged for him to get in the car and get away from here. I was only 15 in hindsight, and we should have reported it to the cops. Here's the creepiest part of the story. As we were getting in the car, I see the man pop out from the parking lot from behind a parked car and started walking the other way. This guy was definitely waiting for us to come out of the store, follow us, and do God knows what. I didn't say anything because I didn't want my dad to try to fight him and have something bad happen, but it just confirmed that this creep was following us and planning on doing some harm. Thankfully, my friend and I were fine and we never saw the guy again, but my friend told her friend about the incident, and she said that she knew the guy because he lives near her and that he's definitely a creep who has had multiple complaints against him. I haven't heard of or seen him since, and I hope he never did anything to harm anyone. I still think about the story 12 years later, and there's a reason I'm so aware of my surroundings at all times, especially when I'm walking alone. To start off with some background, I'm a female, and at the time this happened, I was 12 years old. I lived in a quiet suburb in South Carolina at the time, and used to spend hours just walking my dog around the neighborhood because there wasn't much else to do. At the time, we had a 70-pound basset hound named Rufus, which kind of looked like a sawed-off St. Bernard. So I was walking him late in the afternoon in the fall, and it started to get dark. I was on the other end of the neighborhood from my house when I first saw a beat-up, rusty red pickup truck just kind of driving around. I didn't think a whole lot about it because it's the South, so pickup trucks are all over the place around here. I saw the truck cross the street I was gonna pass, and then come back out the other end, further down, and go back the way I came from. To give you an idea of the neighborhood, it wasn't set up like regular blocks, more like a main road and a bunch of roads that looped around and came back to the main road. At first I figured this guy was lost or something, and still didn't think much of it. But as I was getting closer to my house, and it was getting darker, I saw the truck again. Another thing about my neighborhood was, even though there were a lot of houses, everybody pretty much kept to themselves in their house for the most part, so there wasn't really anyone outside this time of night, even though it was still fairly early. So I come out of the neighborhood onto the main road to my house, and the truck is there again, this time just parked on the side of the road, facing the road I came out from. I turned onto the road to my house, and it started moving, driving slowly behind me with the lights out. Now, if you know anything about a basset hound, they're not the most threatening kind of dogs. They're short and stubby, with big ears and a goofy face, so even if Rufus was a big dog, he wasn't exactly the greatest guard dog. They also didn't walk very fast, and tend to trip over their ears when they run, so I was stuck with him setting a pace, and with him weighing as much as I did, it's not like I could reach down and pick him up, or try to run or anything. So here I am, walking down the dark road in the quiet neighborhood, with my slow-ass dog, and this creepy truck behind me. I knew I couldn't really run from it, and I doubted that anyone would hear me if I tried to scream or something if they came after me, so I finally came up with a plan, even if it was probably a stupid one. When I got to one of the handful of streetlights on the street, I stopped and turned around and just stared the truck down. The truck stopped moving and just kind of sat there about 30 feet away from me, like it was trying to look like it parked or something. I stood there and stared at the truck for what felt like forever, but it was probably around 2 or 3 minutes. After a while, the truck started moving again, turned on its lights, and turned off down another road. I booked it to someone's backyard and took the backyards the rest of the way home. I never told my mom about this creepy truck because I knew she would probably freak out and wouldn't let me take the dogs out alone anymore. This happened a few days ago. It was about 10 p.m. and it was trash night. I had a lot of homework, so I didn't end up taking the trash out earlier. My mom came in and told me to take the trash down to the side of the road, where we always do. For context, we have a church behind our house, and it has a parking lot and a shed right behind our garage. We set our trash cans up against the garage, close to the parking lot. Anyways, I went outside to grab the cans, and noticed a dingy, busted up looking van with 2 doors in the back. I've seen this van before, and for around a month, it was always parked at the other end of the parking lot. It was parked right beside the shed, big back doors facing me. This was not a church van. It was very dirty and rusted, nor did it have any logo. I was standing near my garage, not quite at the trash cans yet, and I had a really bad gut feeling. Something just didn't feel right. I looked closer at the van and noticed the silhouette of a person's head in the driver's seat. I couldn't identify this man or woman because it was dark. This is when my fight or flight senses kicked in. I ran inside because I didn't feel safe and told my mom about it. She said I was overreacting, which was probably true, but told me I could just take the cans down before I left for school. The next morning rolled around and it was 7 a.m. I went to grab the trash cans and the van was gone, which in a way gave me relief that I didn't go near it the night before. I don't know, maybe I'm overreacting, but it's just an unsettling encounter. So I had biked about 10 minutes to take the bus to work during the week. I had spent the weekend with my in-laws, so I didn't have my bike with me last Monday, and I had to walk after the bus got me to the closest stop. It was a 20-minute walk. Basically, it's all residential and numbered by streets. So I get off on, say, 50th Street and walk to 40th. When I first started walking, there's a black car that was on the other side of the road, driving slowly. It pulled off to the right next to somebody's driveway. I didn't think much and just kept walking. When I got to the next street though, the car is doing it again. I walked faster and trying to watch for it. It followed me most of the way there, finally turning off a side road. I didn't recognize the person in the car, which was an older male, but now I'm freaking out. I already have agoraphobia, and when I bike in the mornings, it's dark out there. Can't help but feeling that I'm being followed. Trafficking is a known thing here, and I'm female. Someone please tell me what I should do. I need to get to work, but biking and walking is the only way I can afford it right now, and I'm scared of next Monday. Update. I'm amazed by all the comments and support from y'all. Thank you. I do have pepper spray and a taser, as well as an alarm I carry around my neck that yells really loud. After some suggestions, I downloaded the Noonlight app, and that's giving me the peace of mind that I needed. We have a neighborhood watch on the same street that I'm on, and I've let them, as well as the local police, know. For now, everything is okay, and I'll keep staying alert. It's sad that we have to be so aware of our surroundings, and even worry about things like this. This happened to me about a year ago. I've only ever shared this story with a couple of people. However, I thought it couldn't hurt to share it here. Big disclaimer before going forward. Don't worry, I realize I'm a huge idiot in this situation, and my choices could have put me in danger. However, I made it out alive and unharmed, and that's all that really matters, even if I was too panicked to think properly and acted like a complete idiot. Also, before I forget to mention, I'm a 21-year-old female. So it was around June 2019. I was doing a closing shift at the McDonald's I worked at in town. I live in England, originally from Scotland. We close up at 2 a.m. on weekdays and 3 a.m. on weekends. It had been a Saturday night shift, so I was finished and out the building by 3:15 roughly. When this happened, I was living about 10 to 15 minutes walk from my work in a flat that was mostly taken up by students. I didn't have money to spare to consistently get taxis, and I had been walking home at night for the past year with no incidents, so of course, I didn't think anything differently of doing it again. The majority of my walk was fine, and I was about 4 minutes away from my flat when I noticed a guy just standing near the corner that I had to turn to get home. I am wary when I see people, but usually they're drunk, or mind their own, or just ask for directions. Or it's a homeless person, as there's quite a lot in the city I live in. But at this time at night, they usually keep to themselves. This guy was dressed nice, but casual, looked around mid-20s, well-groomed, tan skin, and a really strong smelling aftershave. He was obviously a regular at a gym too, because he had a muscular figure, and he didn't seem to be drunk by the look of things, but who knows. I tried to keep my distance, but he approached me and started making really casual conversation, asking me what my name was, complimenting my accent, and asking where I was from. I stupidly engaged with him, but gave him a fake name and made it clear I wasn't up for a chat. I should have been firm with my words, but I'm way too introverted and shy to speak up. Even my boyfriend complains that I talk too quietly sometimes, and I struggle to be direct with people. Throughout the whole conversation, he was giving me an unsettling smile and would try to touch my arm or play with my hair, which I made it as clear as I possibly could that I did not approve of. Not that he was listening. He would just say something along the lines of, "But you're just so pretty." Not flattering at all when it's a man who won't take no for an answer. Anyways, this guy asked me for a hug, and even though I refused him as politely as possible, he did it anyways. I froze up for a couple seconds before I moved away, which thankfully he let me do. He was being extremely creepy at this point, and tried feeling over my sides as he gave me a hug, which gave me even more alarm bells ringing in my head. I told him I had to leave, and as I was walking away, I heard, "I'll walk you home. Where do you live?" Unfortunately, I had nowhere else to go but home. Nobody else was around, and it was too early in the morning. My roommate was also back at his own house, as he went back home every weekend. I had a hold of my keys in my pocket and just hoped once I got to the building I could find a way in without this guy being able to invite himself in. I refused his walk home, but he followed me anyways, walking about 8 to 10 feet away from me as I was speeding up at this point, but caught up as I crossed the road. I don't know why I decided to go the long way to get to my building, which was an extra 2 minutes or so not that long. As I was approaching the flat, I felt a horrible sinking feeling in my chest. The door to the building closes really slow at first, before slamming shut, so I knew if I walked in, he could potentially follow me inside, and that puts me at an even greater risk. By this point, he was begging me to let him inside. He said he was extremely thirsty and wanted some water, but I told him that my roommate was sleeping, a subtle way to deter him by showing that I wasn't alone, but that didn't seem to faze him. He was trying to be touchy and just kept pleading with me to let him inside. But I kept my ground and said no as best as possible. As he was talking to me, I managed to use the fob on the door to open it, just enough to carefully slide through. However, he was right by the door and I didn't want to make him upset, so I apologized and told him no once again. Luckily, he had moved away from the door as someone wanted to get into the building. The guy asked if everything was okay when he saw me, but I stupidly said everything was fine. That did give me a chance to move away from the door and let it close once the guy walked through. I didn't even look back to the guy as I ran upstairs to my flat as fast as I could. I didn't get any sleep that night, and from that moment on, I made sure I always had money aside for a taxi. I think I walked home once more between June and October before I moved. Really scary stuff, and I'm glad I never saw him again after that.